Hey Equals, it's Kim, and I'm coming to you from the United Way in Toledo, Ohio. And I'm here this week, both yesterday and today is Thursday, October 4th, for a training about the collection of SOGIE data. So that's, I'll put my video about SOGIE, the link up here. But it's sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. If you think about the first letters of each of those words, it spells out SOGIE, S-O-G-I-E. So SOGIE data collection in this particular training situation in county juvenile justice systems. And so the training was for most of Lucas County's folks that engage with young people in the juvenile justice system. So a lot of probation officers, sexual offense officers, I don't know, the data collection people, I don't even know what all their job titles are, but it was a cross section of folks who work in the juvenile justice system. And interestingly, some of the biggest questions were like, well, why do we need to collect this data? And I'll repeat again that we, LGBT folks who work in advocacy, know that LGBT kids, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and gender non-conforming kids, whether they're straight or gay, make up a disproportionately large number of the kids in state systems, including the juvenile justice system. How do they get there? All kinds of ways, every way that any other child ends up in the system. The thing is that some of them are there or because they are LGBT, or that it's a highly contributing factor. Their parents have kicked them out, they've run away from home because of a bad situation around their identity, number of reasons. So it's one of them. And if we don't know how many of these kids are in the system, it's difficult to convince the powers that be that there needs to be funding, programming to prevent it. We believe that if we collect SOGIE data, that we will find that somewhere close to 40% of the kids in the juvenile justice system are LGBT or gender nonconforming. So that's why we need to collect this data, is to find out just how many of these kids are in the system and to try to get systems in place to prevent them from getting into the system in the first place. All right, so that was kind of a big issue, is why? Well, we could prevent potentially 40% of these kids, or nearly 40%, if we just start to address identity. So these are kids who come into the system, and not only do we want to prevent them from coming into the system in the first place, that's the ideal, but if they are in the system, how can we better serve them? And one of those ways is to treat them with dignity and respect. And dignity and respect have to do with making them feel safe. LGBT kids tend, not all, but tend not to feel safe in systems because especially transgender and gender nonconforming youth are not, the names that they'd prefer to be called or the pronouns that they would prefer were used for them are not often respected. Now, it's one thing if you make a mistake and accidentally use the wrong pronoun or use the wrong name. It's another when it's done purposely to disrespect a child. And often the person doing it, who's purposely disrespecting, will use their personal religious beliefs as a reason for disrespecting the child. People have a right to their personal religious beliefs. What they don't have a right to is to belittle somebody else out in the public sector where you're trying to help them. That is not okay. And I'm going to link up here some of my Make America Compassionate Again videos around belittling and dehumanizing our brothers and sisters, including our LGBT and gender nonconforming brothers and sisters. All right, so what else have we learned? We've learned about that in the LGBT movement, we have certain ways that we like to refer to things. So we talk about gender non-conforming, we talk about gender assigned at birth, we talk about sexual orientation, we talk all kinds of things. All these words that, and I'll link up there the use this, not that video, which, by the way, is one of my early ones and not one of my prouder moments, but I will still link it up there. In these words that we say, use, don't use. And now here in this situation, when we're talking about asking basic demographic information about young people that is inclusive of their sexual orientation and gender identity, and having to ask that at a reading level that is much lower than we're used to speaking. So we have to ask these questions in different ways so that a young person, 10, 13, 15, will understand what it is we're asking them. One of the things that was noticed yesterday in the training is that as adults, we feel very uncomfortable asking these questions, but the experience of the experts who have done this in other places is that really the kids don't care. The kids know what we're talking about. The kids answer the questions. They don't have an issue. They've never raised an issue. Parents in other situations have never raised an issue with this. That it's the person who works for the juvenile justice system that has discomfort around it, not the kids, not the parents. Yeah, so that we have to, as people who work with LGBT young people, move through our discomfort to the other side where we can actually help these kids in a way that is statistically relevant and personal to them. So what else came up? There was a conversation in which the sexual offender officers were a little concerned that young people were experimenting with their sexuality on much younger children. And it occurred to me that they were conflating young pedophiles with LGBT kids. And we need to remember to separate that. Legally defined sexual orientation is heterosexuality, or being straight, bisexuality, where you're romantically, emotionally, and physically attracted to either sex, homosexuality, where you are physically, romantically, and emotionally attracted to the same sex, or well, those are the three that are actually in most laws. Kind of by agreement, asexuality is also included in that, and that is people who are not attracted to anyone, that's not their thing. And that's fine. They also have a sexual orientation. So those four cover general attractions to people if you're thinking in a binary system. If you're not thinking in a binary system, then you're going to want to add pansexual, which means that you're attracted not just to both women and men, but to people who are gender non-conforming or non-binary or don't identify as a man or a woman. And that binary, non-binary stuff was also kind of confusing yesterday. It's a process, and we need to walk through our discomfort. But they were conflating being a pedophile with sexual orientation. Now, is there an argument that pedophilia may be innate to somebody? Maybe. I'm not an expert. But it's not part of the legal definition of sexual orientation that we're using in these particular situations. And so, it's as a society, we have determined that is illegal. So these are not the same thing. I know a lot of our opponents try to, because they'd like to say that LGBT, gender nonconforming people are somehow predators. This is probably something they learned from their parents. It's kind of this trope that has existed for a very, very long time, and it's time for it to go. So anyway, that's my takeaway from day one. I'm about to go in to the meeting space for day two, and I will add either probably an entirely different video about day two for next week. Meanwhile, bye equals, have a great weekend.